Would you like to learn how to make this beautiful chopped apple cake, a multi-generational family favorite? Stay tuned to the next episode of Hilltop Stovetop. Hello and welcome back to Hilltop Stovetop, the show where we're teaching you how to make great meals in an ordinary kitchen. Today we're working on a recipe that was sent to me by a friend of mine from Eganville. Now this friend chooses to remain anonymous, but you know who you are. And these people have been following me right from the beginning and are some of my biggest fans. So when they sent me a recipe with my Christmas letter this year, I said, this is it, I'm going to make it. So we're making today chopped apple cake. And this was sent to me on the back of my Christmas letter. And the story goes that I've had this recipe, which was my great-grandmother's. Now this person is in their 80s now, so they're her great-grandmother. My daughter is the 4th generation cook to make it. It is fairly simple, but makes a grand cake. I make several every fall when the apple crop is harvested. I freeze them ready for the next occasion when I need a cake. And I can see how that would really work with this cake because the apples in it are going to keep it moist, and it's going to be just a lovely cake, whether we eat it today or whether it's something that is a few weeks down the road and we take it out of the freezer for a special occasion. So we're going to start off with a cup of butter. And I've got here 1.5 cups of white sugar, and we're going to cream these together. And those of you that watched my last video on sugar cookies, we know that it's critical that we get this butter nice and creamy and fluffy, because if we don't do it at this stage, it's going to be tough to do it later on. Okay, so we've got our butter and our sugar well creamed together, and you can tell that that has increased the volume quite a bit. Now we've got 3 eggs, and I'm going to add those and mix them in and get that nice and fluffy. All right, so next thing is we're going to get our dry ingredients ready. And I've got 2.5 cups of flour, a teaspoon of baking soda, and a teaspoon of baking powder. So we'll mix that together. Oops. And again, by sifting this, that makes sure that the soda and the baking powder, which are leavening agents, are evenly distributed throughout the flour. And then we're going to add in our spices. I'm just going to move this over here a little bit. So we've got, this is Allspice, and we have cinnamon, 1/2 teaspoon of each, 1/2 teaspoon of nutmeg, and then a heaping tablespoon of cocoa powder. And we're going to mix those things together. Again, this will help make sure that our spices are evenly distributed. And then we're going to add this in gradually into our butter and egg mixture. Now, the recipe does say, if this is a little bit dry, to go ahead and add a little bit of water. When I made this the first time, yes, it was a little bit dry. The dryness will depend a little bit on the size of your eggs, on the water content of your butter, a few variables like that. So it was a little bit dry. I actually added a few tablespoons of buttermilk to mine. It's got the soda in there to counteract the acidity of the buttermilk. That adds a little bit of richness to the flavor, but water works just fine. So. Yeah, I think we do need a little bit more moisture to that. And I do Happen to have a little bit of buttermilk. Now, it doesn't seem like it was very much chocolate that went in there, but because that's pure cocoa powder, you can actually smell the chocolatey flavor. That calls for just a hair more. So that was probably a little over a quarter of a cup in total, maybe, that I've added in here. All right, so we've got all that mixed together. Like we said, it's fairly thick batter. So the last thing we're going to do is add in our apples. Now I have here 3 cups of chopped apples. When I got this recipe, I called her up and I said, would it work if I was to shred the apples, thinking that I could do it on my big grater and it would be faster? She said, no, the recipe does say chopped apples. And I'm glad that I did call her, because chopping the apples leaves them a little bit bigger chunks. I think if I had shredded them, which was my first instinct, was to shred them because that would be quick. But what that would have done is, as it cooked, they would have gotten too soft and almost made it apple saucy, and that would have thinned it out. So anyway, I've chopped up 3 cups of apples. I have them sitting right now in some water with some lemon in them so they didn't go brown. So I'm just going to scoop them out of that. And this is going to add a little bit, or a fair bit more moisture to that. So the fact that it's a thick batter is okay, because as these apples cook, they will soften things up. And that's the other thing that's going to make it really lovely if you have this in the freezer, is keeping those apples in there is going to keep it as a nice moist cake. Now this is also an a cake that we don't need to worry about frosting it. I had it and it was just fine without any icing on it. Not to say that you couldn't, but you don't need to. There you go. And just that little bit of moisture from the apples has softened this up quite a bit as well. Now, the first time I made it in an angel food pan. Today I'm going to make it in a bundt pan. And I've already greased this pan, and what I did was, after I measured out my butter, I had the wrapper that the butter came in. There's that little bit of butter on there. That's what I used to grease this pan. Now, if you want to use a spray-on sort of coating, that's fine. But if you're doing it with grease, they do talk about oiling or buttering a pan and flouring it. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take, instead of flour, I'm going to take a little bit of cocoa powder. And what that's going to do, so first off, the flour and the oil combined add a non-stick coating. And the flour also shows you if you've missed a spot when you were greasing something. But the downside to that is it will leave a white coating on the outside of your cake. So by using a little bit of cocoa powder instead of the flour, that will mean that we don't have that white coating. So what we're doing here is we're just tapping it around. And particularly when you've got a bundt pan which has all these scallops in it, you really want to be sure that you've got things covered. I don't know if you can see on the overhead shot, but there are a couple of spots that I'd missed. So I'm going to go back with a little bit of extra butter here. Touch up those little spots. That means I need to flour it again, but at least then I know I've got those spots taken care of. And by having this disposable sort of thing, it's not too mucky. There we go. And then the excess I'll just pop into the sink. We're going to put our batter in. Now this recipe also calls to add some chopped nuts to it. I haven't added nuts today because I am going to be sharing this cake with a friend whose child has a nut allergy. So we don't want to risk any problems there. So, I mean, it's nice with the nuts in it, but it's not something that's going to affect the outcome of the bake itself. Pretty good now. Now what we're going to do is we're going to pop this in the oven, 350 degrees for 70 minutes. That's an hour and 10 minutes. One thing that I don't think I've talked about in my videos was when we're putting things in the oven is to be aware of where your oven racks are. So the last video where we made the sugar cookies, I wanted the rack on the very middle rack in the oven. But with this cake, because it's a little taller, I've moved the rack down a little bit. So the bulk of the body of it is still in the center of the oven. If I'd left it on the middle, then the top of the cake would be too close to the top element. So 70 minutes in 350 degrees, and we'll see you when it's done. All right, so we're an hour and 10 minutes in. When we touch the cake, of course, it bounces back. You can see around the edges that it's starting to pull away from the side of the pan. And we'll just double check by putting in a toothpick in a few different spots. And in all cases, it's coming out clean. So that sounds to me like we are ready to go. And what we will do now is we're going to let this cool in the pan before we flip it out. So we will see you in an hour or so after this has had a chance to cool down. Okay. All right, so we've patiently waited for our cake to cool. And I did use my little knife here to just go down around the edges. This particular knife is made out of plastic. So this pan that has a nonstick coating is less likely to get scratched. So anyway, we're going to give it a quick little flip here. Oop, there we go. Turned out not too bad. We've got a nice dark color because of the cocoa that I used instead of the flour for dusting the pan. And I'm not going to bother icing this. It is very moist all on its own. If you chose to, you could just do a glaze, like a confectioner sugar and water with a little bit of oil added to it, makes a nice glaze over that. But I'm not going to worry about that. We're just going to dive right in. You can tell just by the way it slices, it is a very moist cake. And there we go. So we've got a nice moist texture, very fine texture to this, and little chunks of apple all through it. It is delicious, awesome. Try it. There's a reason that this cake has made it through 4 generations of my friend's family. So thank you for joining us again on Hilltop Stovetop, where we've made chopped apple cake. And we'll see you soon at the next episode. And don't forget to like and subscribe in YouTube, because that's what keeps me going. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye for now.